Nick C. If Hubbard were to live and develop Scientology in the 2020s rather than in the 1950s, do you think he would require electronic recording of auditing sessions? If so, would it be audio or video? If not, why not? More broadly, do you have any thoughts about the effects of technology on the practices of destructive cults? The impact on outward-aimed functions, internet PR, recruitment via social media, etc., is clearly visible from the outside. But what about internal functions aimed at the current members? Some future Hubbard could conceivably come up with a God helmet attached directly to an AI. What do you think? Okay, thank you for this question, Nick. There's some layers to this one. Let's take a look at a few things. First off, you ask about the technology of recording auditing sessions, and if Hubbard were to start up now, then he absolutely would be taking advantage of the latest and greatest. Hubbard was all about the latest and greatest, and he was about being a trendsetter. Hubbard said he didn't follow trends, he set them. And in the 1980s, in regards to music, is what he was talking about there in filmmaking. But that was his attitude about him and his place and his position in the world. He considered himself an authority figure for the world. So he was always trying to be up ahead at the bleeding edge of where things were at. For example, the installation of the telex systems, which was cutting edge tech at the time that he was putting it in internationally with Scientology organizations in the mid-1960s. Early to mid-60s is when that was happening. And that was an international communications network that he set up with those groups. Not trying to show off or say that he did something impressive. I'm trying to say that he was trying to keep up with the latest and greatest because he wanted his organizations to operate efficiently and smoothly. In the 1960s is when, in terms of layering here, 1960s is when modern Scientology was developed. Throughout the 1950s, Scientology and Dianetics auditing looked and sounded and felt very different from how auditing looks and sounds and feels now. That's because of what Hubbard put together in the 60s. And I bring this up because originally, in the 1950s, auditing worksheets, as I've described in gory detail here on this show, hardly existed. PC folders weren't really a thing. Case supervision with, the auditor, and he writes it up and puts it in a folder and sends it to the case supervisor. That whole system didn't even exist in the 1950s. This was something that was developed at St. Hill in the 60s. I'm bringing this up because Hubbard's efforts to record auditing really started there. And there was a look-listen system, and Hubbard was using AV. He was using cameras, live feed, black and white cameras, and he was doing auditing demonstrations where he was showing how to do auditing by putting a camera and recording in the room and live feeding it to a room of students who would be watching the auditing demonstration. And there are many recorded demonstrations of this. There are audio recordings of them, not video recordings, because I don't know that he had video recording technology at that time to record the live streaming that he was doing. He did do some films. He did film work of some of his auditing demonstrations and of auditing sessions, but that was for educational purposes to train auditors. It was also in the 1960s that Hubbard developed the Guardian's Office and the whole private investigator, vindictive fair gaming thing. That really came to the fore in the 60s, especially when he started up the Sea Org. So by that point is when the reason I'm talking about all this in this detail is because I believe it was in this time period that Hubbard started realizing, right, starting in that 1960 with the sec checking being developed, the security checking, and then the worksheets and the live streaming and the video camera work and the recording of things. It was during this time period that I think Hubbard realized the power of having blackmail material on his parishioners. Right? I don't think that was really top front and center in his head during the 1950s. I think he had bigger picture items on his agenda in terms of building up the organizations, surviving, making money, etc. But by the time of St. Hill and all of that, he had an operation. It was going, and he was refining and working over how auditing should be done. And I think this is the point when he realized that, hey, we've got power here. We've got people's secrets, and I can use this if they turn on us. And this is when the fair gaming came into play. Okay, so point is that if he'd had the ability to audio and visually record all the auditing sessions that were going on, I think he absolutely would have put it into place at that time. And so if he developed it now, yes, I do think that you would see that. And that's my whole case for that, right? Is because of how the whole thing developed in the first place. I wanted to give all that reasoning to it. So that is that part of the answer. And then the other thing you asked about is what other, beyond Scientology, what other technical things would some of these destructive cults out there utilize technology for, or modern, outward aimed functions, of course, we see, but what about internal functions? What you're trying to do as a cult leader is recruit, retain, and suck up as much power, money, influence, sex, whatever you need or want from these people. That's what you're trying to accomplish. Anything that will help you achieve that end will be something you would welcome. So if you could reach more people for purposes of recruitment or retention with AI, with an Oculus, with virtual reality meeting spaces, with virtual reality recruitment, with virtual reality events, with virtual reality one-on-ones where you could have an interaction with somebody on the other side of the planet, yeah, of course they would take advantage of that kind of technology. If it served their purposes, and if the technology was such that they could use it to manipulate the hearts and minds of their followers. It certainly is the case that the more, real the simulations look, the more immersive the technology becomes, the more that cult leader type personalities will glom onto this technology to use it to manipulate other people. This is already happening. Unfortunately, and something I am going to comment on here that goes beyond the scope, I think, of your question, Nick, but is actually much more of the problem with this technology, are the people who are developing it and what they're developing it, what they're using it for, what they're doing with it. Facebook hasn't changed one thing about their operations since the revelations of the Social Dilemma documentary and all the things we're learning about their algorithms and their ways of operating. Facebook is not a good group. It's not a good group of people running that show. And we have the VR, for example, Facebook purchased Oculus, which produces a VR headset, and they do that for gaming. Well, Facebook decided to purchase that, and what do you think Facebook is doing with that technology? Well, how valuable do you think it would be to Facebook to not only know what it is you're interested in and what sort of subject matter you'll respond to, but what if they knew down to the millimeter where your eyes go on a page when your eyes are on a screen looking and perusing and going through the web, and Facebook is tracking all of your web activity if you let them, not just your Facebook activity. If you download Facebook, you download Messenger, I think you'll find in the terms of service that they will try to get you to opt in on tracking you 24/7. And they want to know where your eyeballs are at. Why do you think they want to know that? Well, in the end of the day, it really comes down to trying to sell you things. But they're trying to sell you things by manipulating your attention, focusing your attention where they want it, not where you want it, where they want it. Because they need to keep your eyes on the screen for as long as they can. Now, that's Facebook. That's a mega corporation. And that's the level of control they're interested in managing and creating and retaining over you. So the lines are becoming a little blurred these days between these mega corporations and what they're up to, and destructive cults and what they're up to. The lines are a little blurry these days. And I don't say this to be alarmist. I don't say this because I like the situation. I'm not saying this because I think Facebook is a cult. It's worse than a cult because it's a hidden cult. It's a hidden influencer. They're doing things to you through social media platforms that you have no idea about and you never, ever consented to. They're doing it anyway because they can, because you're the product. And so, is it a cult? No, but does it act like a cult? Does it act like a cult leader? Does it engage in thought reform technology? Does it use methods of thought reform to control you and your attention and your time? Yeah, they do. They do. And we all kind of know they do, and we're just kind of letting it happen. I figured it'd be an opportunity for me to talk about this a little bit because it does fit in with the subject matter of your question, Nick, and it is something that is so big and so overwhelming that most of us are having a real hard time trying to, deal with it at all. And it's a lot easier to just kind of go into denial about it. And I get it. I totally get that. What are you or I supposed to do about, Zuckerberg's overreach? We really can't do a whole lot of anything except be aware of it and push back against it as much as we can and just get off those goddamn platforms. It's a tough situation for me because my livelihood depends on me creating content that you guys can see, and I have to use social media platforms to share that content and comment on that content and for you guys to be able to get it. But that doesn't change the fact that these platforms are using some very scary and very powerful technology against us. And they are leveraging it against us in ways that none of us would be comfortable with if we knew about it, which is why I recommend finding out about it so that you are not giving them as many opportunities as they would like for them to control you and your attention and your money and your time. And that might be actually the broadest example or answer to the question you actually asked, Nick. So, AI helmets, sure, that's in the future. Anything is in the future that's going to help them leverage your mental biases and logical fallacies against you. Anything that will accomplish that, some cult leader somewhere will use against you. What that might look like, I don't know. But it'll look like how it looks now. It'll just look sexier. If you know what I mean. All right, there you go.